Hello and welcome to Money Markets and More. My name is Dominic Frisby and today we ask what happens when you destroy money? The challenges of life in everyday life in Turkey. Couple of quick don't forgets before we start. If you're in the Scottish neck of the woods this August, come and see my show at the Edinburgh Fringe. My lecture with funny bits all about the history of mining. It's going to be performed in the room in which Adam Smith wrote Wealth of Nations, 2 p.m. every day. There's a link to buy tickets in the description. And also, please don't forget to buy my book, Life After the State, my first book. It's back in print. It's many people's favourite of all my books. And I'll put a link to that in the description. I recommend the audio book, Winky Face. Right, Turkey. Over the last decade, the Turkish lira has seen declines of more than 95% against the US dollar. Just took 1 lira 50 to buy a dollar 10 years ago. Now it takes 33 lira. And the lira has been one of the world's worst performing currencies. And in a fiat world, that is saying something. Rivaled only by the Venezuelan bolivar and the Argentinian peso. And I was in Istanbul last week, and while there I spoke to two young professionals, Emre, who's 25, and Ika, who's 27, about life under the lira. Both are bright, articulate, empathetic young men. They speak 3 languages fluently, English, German and Turkish, as well as competent French. And given that the currency has been so bad, I was expecting to see more widespread use of foreign money. But in fact, lira are changing hands everywhere. You see people all over the world with wads of them, big wads of money coming out of their pockets. And you have to use the lira, my friends explained to me. It's the national currency. But even with such dire inflation, there is still trade. The economy still functions, albeit badly. That said, everything in the airports was denominated in euros. So food, energy, travel, housing, consumer goods, everything's gone up in price. But surprise, surprise, wages haven't gone up by nearly as much. And the result is that ordinary people have been impoverished. The average wage in Istanbul is about £650 per month, they told me. One thing that impressed me, by the way, was how immediately they could translate lira into pounds, dollars or euros. Instantaneous. What about the receptionist in my hotel, or a waiter, I said? Maybe £500 a month? Taxi driver working all hours? Maybe 800 quid a month? And with those kind of earnings, it's hard to make ends meet, particularly if stuff isn't that much cheaper than it is in England. And that's why everybody wants to meet a tourist, they smiled in reply. So what do you do? I asked. Do you just literally spend your money as soon as you have it, before it loses its purchasing power? And they said yes. There is no point saving. When we were students, they told me a few years ago, you could save for maybe 3 years and buy a car. Now it would take you 20 years. There is no point saving in lira. We spend the money as soon as we have it. Even on stupid things, added Emre, pointing to his watch, which Casio watch. You may as well. Now, everyone is the same, apparently. They spend as soon as they earn. There's no point saving a currency that will soon be worth less. And the rates of interest paid, they don't compensate, especially given that you usually have to tie up your money for 1, 2 or 3 years to obtain decent rates of interest. And the inflation risk of doing that is simply too great. And indeed, interest rates have been quite the issue in Turkey because mainstream Islamic finance prohibits interest. And that's something that they said the Turkish president Erdogan exploited. Until 2023, by the way, Erdogan kept a lid on rates. They're now 50%. And he argued that high rates cause inflation. He also repeatedly replaced central bank governors who resisted low rates. So how do people save? I asked, and gold came the answer straight away. Everyone who can buys gold, even tiny amounts below a gram. Silver? I asked. Not so much. I asked them if they use Revolut or similar to hold foreign currencies, and they had no idea what Revolut was, which is maybe not such a bad thing given what can happen. But it seems that most banks offer the ability to hold euros, pounds and dollars, and so citizens tend to convert their lira as quickly as they can into foreign currency. What about Bitcoin? I said, not really. They said, some young people. Now, I was very surprised by that. I saw quite a few adverts for Bitcoin related products around the place, but apparently gold is more common. Even like up to tiny amounts, half a gram. What about saving up to buy a house? They both laughed at the impossibility. And there isn't even a lot of debt in the Turkish housing market. Mortgages, as we know them in the West, they don't really exist, though there are ways to borrow money. It's still unaffordable, though, housing. So people aren't starting families then, I asked. No, we can't. Our population growth is starting to turn negative. So you two are not close to starting a family. And they shook their heads sadly. What do we have to offer? And I felt so sorry for these two young men. Both would be good husbands, good fathers. When people do start families, they rent small flats. Mum works, dad works, grandparents work. And this is something I saw directly myself. The taxi that picked me up at the airport had mum and dad in the front. And then I got in the back and their two kids were asleep in the back seat. And dad was continuing to work into the night. Typical one-bed flat might be about £500 a month to rent. But there isn't the same culture of flat sharing among young professionals that we have in the UK, except maybe for students. Most young people stay with their parents until they marry. I struggle to understand how anyone could make any money in such a situation and better their lot. All asset owners are doing is protecting their wealth against the currency debasement. They're not actually growing it, and people on salaries, hopeless. Who's the richest person in the country, I wondered. Erdogan, they both said immediately. Officially, probably the Koch family. They own Fenerbahce, the football club. But really, it is almost certainly Erdogan. The state of the currency and the political leadership is no doubt a huge deterrent to foreign investment. So what about leaving, I asked. That's hard too. The routes into Europe aren't as easy as they once were. Far fewer Turks now go to Germany, for example. Even just getting a tourist visa, let alone a proper visa, can take 2 years, and the money they earn lasts not even a few days in Europe. Some illegals travel across the Mediterranean up through Spain, but the US via Mexico is now the most common escape. But it's a very expensive escape. Most are trapped in their own country. What a sad state of affairs. Isn't fiat money a terrible thing? What it can do to a country and its people, how it can make things so hopeless. And the bizarre thing is there is economic activity everywhere. Everyone is hustling. Everyone is working. They all want to better themselves and their lot. People want to trade. That is the natural human way of things. Imagine if it were all underpinned by sound money. Thanks very much for watching. Thanks very much for being a subscriber to this show. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. Links to everything in the description. And of course, look out for my book and my Edinburgh show. Until next time, goodbye.